use a T-chart to distinguish facts and details or a character's perspective, when authentically as an adult, when I read, I'm just thinking about what's on the page with a couple transferable habits of reading. So we're gonna go through what that would look like, but the reason that we do that is because if we ground everything in the meaning of the text first, then the kids are gonna have a foundation to actually respond to questions about what they're reading, right? So one of the big misconceptions we get is that shared text or close reading is about test prep, right? That's false, right? We want to get kids to understand the main idea as a starting point so that when they get questions about a text, they're prepared to answer based on their holistic understanding of what they read. And that's ultimately gonna make them more successful across a wide variety of holistic assessments. When we say intellectual preparation, we're talking about adult planning. And a lot of times it feels weird to sit around and talk about like a 3rd grade level book or text as an adult because we are proficient readers. But it's a lot harder to clearly articulate or illuminate thinking to 7 and 8 or 6 or 9-year-olds. And so when we talk about intellectual preparation, it's both what the book is about, what the ideas are, but actually how we would get out in front of kids and articulate that. We'll have some practice today, and then we want kids to read things that are worth reading, right? So this approach kind of sinks or swims based on whether or not a text is a worthwhile endeavor to put in front of children. So we're gonna read a text today for a little bit of a model that I think is fun and exciting, and we can bring that to it. But that's really important. I think some of us have mentioned guided reading also. Obviously we pick by level. We also want to pick a book that is reflective of what the kids in our group actually want to read and can expose them to new and interesting things to reinforce the idea that you read to learn. So those are some of the core kind of beliefs and principles that we have that are going to come out through the training today. All right, 2 things that we hope to accomplish before the end of today's session. One is for folks who are familiar to maybe reinvest in what the purpose of close reading and shared text is and the structure of our approach. For folks that are new, you'll have sort of a crash course introduction and what that can look like. And then one of the things that your leaders have shared is that right now, kind of present state, shared text feels kind of like a slog for kids, that you're not seeing a level of authentic investment or engagement in the reading. And so we're gonna go through some tactics in implementation for how to build authentic investment around a culture of reading. So I'm gonna try to model some of that. We also have some strategies here that we can go through, and that's gonna be then the focus of the planning and practice that we do in the session so that you can hopefully leave with an actual lesson plan you would be teaching, if not tomorrow, then next week, to try some of this out. Okay, I'm almost done talking at you, I promise. So one of the big misconceptions we gave in the beginning is that the shared text work is around test prep, that that's the ultimate goal of shared text. That's not the goal, right? And so I would be curious kind of right now, just at your table, if you want to take a minute, if someone were to ask you what is the purpose of our close reading approach or of shared text generally, how would you answer that? I'll take just a minute with folks around you, we can share some ideas.
Ideally, I would answer that it's about building joy and investment in reading and about like that, but like the way it is functioning now, it's about like this was your data on AIMIS, so we're going to attack this standard so that the next time they take the same question, they're going to get it right. And like that is not a transferable way to build student motivation. I think there are ways to do that. Like I manipulate the hell out of the children in my group because they don't like to read. But like we have a good time and they're doing the work. But my goal in there is like we're gonna build your fluency and confidence with this task, and like we're gonna like practice our critical thinking skills. Yeah. Something like they were excited about Eliza because they've seen the documentaries. Like,
and they're like, who's this painter?
I have done that, but like, yeah.
All right. Let's go ahead and come back as a group, and not surprisingly, I think the themes at most tables were the same, but can people just share out some of the things that stood out to you?
Sure, I just wanted to highlight, like you said, it's become test prep, and that's like not because of anything that teachers are doing, but because what we've agreed, like the block has become. Like, they're doing that because they were told to do that. And like, as we talked earlier, like shared text is like the most flexible in terms of time, and so that's where we decided to address it. But I had my ear to this table too, and we talked about it. Like, the world-class literature has like gone out the window. Like, the excitement the third grade team has built around Japan has been like, because now they're reading like response to ANET passages versus like the one piece that Eliza's trees, like they were excited about because it's something they could connect to. And so thinking about, to your point, like how do we get back to that and prepare them and like answer these questions that like they're still struggling with, and the standards are still struggling with.
Yep, I like that, because it's not, I don't want to frame it as like an either or. It's like sometimes we're like being really data centric and super intentional on driving kids to mastery, and then other times we just like read on beanbags. Like, that's not the case either. You can do both. I think the goal is that we want to be able to illuminate, right, all the way that kids can approach a text in an authentic way, so that that's how they do it on a test, right? That ultimately we're making better readers, and that's why their scores go up.
I would also reflect, I've just started teaching this, so I was thinking about like, why would I do a close reading of something like in college? And like, I was doing close reading all the time in order to like learn more about something that I was then going to like use to like create my own thoughts. And I was thinking about how I should probably implement that thinking into like my own teaching of shared text, so that the like usefulness of it is forever.
Right.
When I was thinking about like when I teach this block during my day, I teach students who like get to those tests and like feel very just kind of dead inside, like they have no idea or it's too much and overwhelmed. And so like I use that time as like a confidence building block in my day to like build, like they don't often feel super confident in focused lesson or writing, so like being able to like take something like they're gonna see on one of those tests and have them like get the tools to access it better, while somehow like making them enjoy their time doing that is sort of like the goal I have at the time.
Great. So we'll define this in just a minute, but I think some of the things that I'm hearing are, you know, I want to make sure we're clear that shared text has a different purpose than guided reading, right? Guided reading is really a time where, whether it's informed by a step bottom line or FMP or whatever model you're using, that's where you give some really targeted push for kids on their instructional level, right? And then they have an opportunity for really quick practice around some kind of transferable reading strategy, right? Shared text is whole class on purpose. Oftentimes the texts are either at or slightly above where kids would read independently, and it's our chance to like illuminate the way that we think as adults very authentically about a text, in the hopes of building that, whether it's confidence or building their capacity around how to think about what they're reading, right? So that's one of the things that we're gonna model. But ultimately, for us, the purpose of the close reading approach is to build kids' independence as readers, right? Which is why transferability is gonna be a huge theme of what we talk about today. But the way that we build their kind of independent access, we want the block to be sort of joyful and authentically engaging. We do want to build our confidence. It's a really important part. It's why we do kind of shared reading together, and precision. And so we want to make sure, again, going back to adults' intellectual preparation, that we can get kids to grapple with the text just like we would in college, which might require going back to a particular line and rereading again to like hone my thinking so that I can both defend it with evidence, which we saw a lot of in your class today, and come up with a really clearly articulated thought about what I'm reading. All right, so we're gonna go through kind of the structure that we use for our approach. I already know this is not the structure as it currently is at your school, right? So the reason for doing this is more that I wanna kind of clarify some of the purpose behind this thinking, give you insight into that part of the model, and then also reassure you that it looks different at most of the schools that we work with, right? This is ideal, and I can kind of explain why. This is gonna be the last part that we focus on like logistical implementation, and then we can focus on the pedagogy piece. But I do wanna name that because I think that we're gonna be thinking a little bit more strategically about how to leverage the block in a way that is gonna be most productive for kids, and this is part of the reason why. Typically, we recommend to approach close reading in a 3-day cycle. And in doing so, you actually read 2 different texts rather than the same text for an entire week. When we think about kid engagement, right, reading the same text every day for 4 or 5 days a week, it's gonna be hard to draw really authentic insights or connection to a text over time. So our model is we teach one text that is a shared text for days 1 and 2. The first day you read to get to main idea. The second day, you read the same text again with that main idea in mind and talk about craft moves that the author made, right? So that's sort of your craft and structure day. But even that is really important that it constantly connects back to main idea. We don't want to try to teach kids that like X, Y, Z moves are operating in isolation from the text. Anything an author does is in service of their main idea, and we want kids to make that connection. And then the last day of the cycle is mastery text, which is generally the shared text is somewhere 3 to 6 months above on grade level reading, which is why we read it together. The mastery text would be at grade level. It would be something we would expect kids to independently access of the same genre. And the purpose of that is not a quiz. It's not a quiz or a test day. It's like very active coaching of students, strategic small groups. It's where we can bring in a lot of the data-driven instruction we were talking about. But the purpose is to see if kids, without the shared reading whole class discussion, can apply the takeaways or the reading habits you were trying to build on days 1 and 2. So that's the way the cycle works now. Does anyone have questions? I don't want to open like a can of worms. I know that we can talk about what that would look like or how this might fit into what you're already doing, but just really wanted folks to understand kind of the purpose and the thinking behind it.
So the mastery text would also have like a similar, the author would make similar craft and structure moves?
Maybe. It's the most important thing is that it's the same genre and then it's slightly more accessible independently. To the extent that we can find a craft move that is the same, that's great. But oftentimes, like there might be, 3 to 5 different moves that we can choose to highlight here, and something different that shows up in the mastery text.
What are they doing with the mastery text?
So that would be essentially what you replace is the reading and discussing together. So you still have a launch. Typically, it's grounded in kid work, right? You might say, all right, for the last 2 days, we've been reading a poem, and what I realized is that we're really great at identifying what's actually happening in a poem, but we're not using our understanding of what we read to help unlock the poet's message. So today, you're gonna read a poem on your own, and I want you to, X, Y, Z takeaways from the day, right? There's still some kind of launch grounded in what that was. Then the kids read independently to get to a main idea, and then at the end of that, you still do the discourse, right? So you'd say, great, this is what I'm seeing. If they're all really struggling, you would stop, do a mid-workshop teaching point in the moment, kind of address it, let the kids go on to revise. But the biggest change is it's just they read independently first. Okay. All right, so I want to give some materials that we'll use for the rest of this session. There's a couple different things in here, but for now we're just going to start with the first page, which is some tips and tactics that we use for building engagement around the close reading work. So as we pass this out, take a couple minutes to look at it. You can use these 2 questions here, and then we'll share some of the things that stand out to you based on what you read.
Way to bring the joy.
you're still reading, go ahead. I think if you finish, take 1, maybe 2 minutes with folks at your table to talk about some of the things that stood out, what you might already do, what you think you could use in your own classroom.
Because like even in focus lesson, we talk about like how possible. Yeah, but I've been talking about her. I'm like, okay, she does this. And same thing in graduate. We talk about she does
It's always something. When we had more time, we would spend Thursday writing, but then we would pose a question at the end, and we would talk
Well,
about
that
it.
helps.
And it was just fun to listen to them, like, go back
get
and
to
forth
know like,
about
oh, this
it,
person
and just kind of like sit back and watch it happen. When we had the time to do that.
Yeah.
I think one of the things like I always get the first
I did have an open discussion about the sexual assault. It really tells you, do they
like you
understand?
like, and that's
Do they need help?
we'll get it.
You know,
But like we can't wait for you to
I think that's great.
because it's gonna slow
And that
down
also
and
goes
then
in
so
with,
everyone's like versus if we like keep moving